Now, the great thing about being a wrestling fan today is that for the first time in a long time, it feels like there are genuine alternatives out there. If you're fed up with WWE, you can just tune into New Japan Pro Wrestling instead, or if AEW is not doing it for you, there's always NXT airing the same night, or even the brilliant throwback NWA Power the night prior. For gamers who are tired of the often formulaic WWE 2K series, it's good to know that they don't hold a monopoly on the market and that there are other fantastic alternatives out there too. So be sure to subscribe and click that notification bell, because today we're going to be looking at one of the best of these alternatives. You'll be sure to put your copy of WWE 2K20 in the bin for this one. Wrestling occupies a hazy middle ground within the entertainment industry, not quite a sport and not quite theatre. It's quite unique in what it does and how it interacts with these different mediums, and the end result is something entirely new. There is undeniably a high amount of athletic skill required, but perhaps even more than that, a strong sense of storytelling is needed to be a successful wrestler. The best wrestling matches will have the same ebb and flow as the best movies do, starting off slowly and pacing themselves carefully throughout to keep their audience engaged, before often reaching a huge crescendo at the end to send fans home satisfied. Wrestling video games have always struggled with trying to recreate this element, but the Fire Pro Wrestling series may be the one true example of getting it right. The series began all the way back in 1989 with Fire Pro Wrestling Combination Tag for PC, and it's grown more popular with each release, now climaxing with the most recent installment, Fire Pro Wrestling World. Developed by Zex Corporation and Spike Chunsoft, the game was released as an early access title on Steam on July 11, 2017, with a full release following for PC on December 18th of that same year, and then again for PS4 on August 28, 2018. The game separates itself from others on the market by focusing more on strategy and timing-based system of fighting than the button-mashing style found in other games. This different style of play can be intimidating and difficult for new players, and it is undeniable that the controls can be somewhat fiddly at first, with distances and angles needed to be taken into account when positioning yourself to strike your opponent, but there's even a button to use to catch your breath, which players must strategically use whenever they have a spare moment in the middle of a bout, much in the same way that a real fighter would have to think about this to prevent from getting gassed. The focus here is on precision and careful planning. You have to read your opponent, make it feel more like an actual fight than a typical arcade beat-em-up. Little touches like this add extra layers of realism to the game. There's also no central HUD to look at while playing, so you have to judge both you and your opponent's stamina and health based on a series of visual cues by paying close attention to the character sprites. It all feels wonderfully subtle in a way that nothing with the WWE label ever does, and once you do get past the initial difficulty curve and get accustomed to the way of playing, you will find it hugely rewarding. There's a definite lack of hand-holding which many gamers will appreciate. You can't just jump in and perform big finishing moves right at the start of the match either. You have to build your way up to them, much like the best New Japan matches will slowly build to a crazy finish. Matches start out with you using light attacks before building up to medium and then heavy ones. By the point you're pulling off your big moves, you'll feel like you've been through a well-paced war with back and forth action throughout, and when that final pinning move comes, the sense of satisfaction is beyond anything the 2K series have ever put out. Of course, with all this talk of New Japan style fighting, aka strong style, it makes sense that with this edition, Fire Pro Wrestling partnered with New Japan Pro Wrestling themselves to allow licensed versions of various wrestlers. This is one of the game's biggest selling points, in fact. It also includes the Fighting Road story mode, where you can take your character and progress from the dojo all the way to the IWGP Heavyweight Championship, implementing an RPG style stats system where you can see your fighter grow and develop over time. This is similar to WWE 2K's career modes, but far more satisfying in its simplicity. Aside from this, there are the usual modes and match types that fans of the series will be familiar with. Cage matches, death matches, MMA rules matches, and the wonderfully over-the-top barbed wire and landmines matches are all available. Much of the game is carried over from previous installments, in fact, but that isn't a negative here. The developers have the attitude of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. They know what works and what fans like, and here they provide it in spades. The graphics, as we've mentioned already, are more of a sprite style in the vein of classic RPGs like Final Fantasy VI or Chrono Trigger. For fans who like more realistic looking visuals in the game, this won't necessarily be for them, but it serves as a delightful throwback for others, and once again it should be noted that the focus here is on satisfying gameplay above all else. There's also a wealth of options when it comes to customization, which will please most fans. Create a Wrestler mode has a huge amount of depth, and you can create pretty much any character you can imagine, with some of the best fan creations including the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and even their arch enemy Shredder. As well as this, you can edit championship belts, rings, and even referees to your heart's content. Or if you don't have the time or energy for that, choose from one of the hundreds of ready-made fan creations available online. An online multiplayer mode is available too, which allows up to 4 players to challenge each other at a time, and as of August 2019, a DLC release has included the Women of Stardom Wrestling as playable characters in the game, so now you can get your Joshi fix. This comes in the addition to the previous DLC released shortly after the final game, which added the Fire Promoter mode, allowing players to take the reins of their own promotion, similar to the old GM mode in the WWE series, something which fans of those games have been begging to make a return for years. Now, we've been glowing with praise so far, but this is not to suggest that this game is perfect. The menus are perhaps the biggest issue. They can be frustrating and aren't exactly user-friendly. You'll have to go digging about through these to get what you're looking for, and they can be quite dry, but for a beginner it is recommended that you take time with these, unless you find some very helpful tutorials that will give you a bit of a boost in those difficult first few hours. There's also a minor issue of there being no Xbox release for the game this time around, and there is no release in sight, which is a disappointment for Microsoft fans. The PS4 version of the game has also reportedly been subject to some frame rate issues when a lot of characters appear in the ring at one time, which has caused some frustration, though these problems don't seem to have affected the PC version. Still, these are mostly minor complaints and certainly nothing deal-breaking. While it might not be a perfect game, perhaps the best thing that can be said about it is that it plays like a breath of fresh air when compared to the often bloated and broken behemoth that is the WWE 2K franchise. Think of this as the indie darling to that series' overproduced Hollywood blockbuster, featuring barrelfuls of charm in place of surface polish. Where the WWE games don't feel like real wrestling, but instead feel like the cartoonish sports entertainment that Vince McMahon is so famous for, this couldn't be further from the truth. The partnership with New Japan Pro Wrestling is the perfect one to symbolize exactly what you can expect when booting this one up. For those who like an in-depth experience and a good challenge, this is all you'll ever need from a wrestling game. There's lots of replay value here because just like the best fighting games, this is something that will take you a long time to master. Of course, you probably already decided whether this game is for you based on what we've said here, but we have to stress that even if it doesn't sound like it's for you at first, we implore you to try it out because you really are missing out on one of the most fun and complete wrestling games on the market otherwise. Hi! This is the pinnacle of what the Fire Pro Wrestling series has been building up to for all these years. You owe it to yourself not to skip this one, especially since it can be purchased for less than half the price of what you would expect to pay for WWE 2K20. It's currently costing around £20 on Steam in the UK with comparable prices elsewhere. However, looking at the state of WWE 2K20 now, it's probably already in your bargain bin. You could probably pick it up for a tenner. Still, Fire Pro Wrestling is still worth it, even if it's double the price. But there you have it guys, why you should trade WWE 2K20 for Fire Pro Wrestling World. Be sure to leave your comments down below, subscribe if you haven't already, follow us on Instagram and Twitter,